Terrific, thank you. Hi, I'm Chris Anderson, Bre Pettis. Thank you. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to give you I'm going to do a little sort of presentation involving pictures and stuff. Then Bre's going to talk about awesome stuff, one of which is right here. Then we're going to talk a little bit amongst ourselves.
Talking about going big.
Talking about going big. And then we'll take questions. So I will start by just sort of giving an overview. Bre and I, there are really two elements to what's going on here at Maker Faire. One is just this sort of explosion of creativity that is amateurism done in public, and these are the garages of the world opening up, and that's incredibly exciting. Some makers decide to become entrepreneurs, and once they become entrepreneurs, they then think about going big. And so what Bre and I are going to talk about is the industrialization of the maker movement. The sense that this could be a driver for the American economy, this could be a source of job creation, this could bring manufacturing back to America, and this could be, the next big thing. And we're not just looking at it, we're doing it, and we'll talk a little bit about how it works. Basically, this is my thesis, and there's only one words on the slide. But the last 20 years on the web were an amazing thing. We discovered more than anything else a new way to work together and innovate in public. And it's faster, better, cheaper. It is revolutionary, but it's largely in the world of bits. It's on screens, it's information. We live in the world of atoms, here we are. Taking that innovation model and applying it to making stuff in manufacturing is potentially orders of magnitude more powerful, and it's a bigger market. And that's really what we're exploring. Industrial revolution is a big word, and actually people debate when the Industrial Revolution started, but one answer is 1776, the same year as the American Revolution, and that's when the spinning jenny, which is a kind of a multiple wheel spinning wheel, was developed and spread. Regular spinning wheels have been around since the fairy tale times. But the idea of putting multiple wheels on, except prick your finger and all that, multiple wheels powered by foot allowed one person to make many threads. And this amplified human potential and began to replace muscle power with machine power. And then came electricity and steam and water and other sorts of drivers. But ultimately we ended up building factories. And what you do when you build a factory is you do the ultimate amplification of human potential, but it comes at a certain cost, which is you need to move to the factory. You work for the man, or you work for the machine, more to the point. And this created urbanism, it created cities, it changed the world in terms of things like quality of life expectancy, child mortality. It turns out, by the way, that living in rural England, although pastoral in pictures, the walls were damp. You had no sewers, no access to clean water. It was actually, life expectancy was pretty low. But when you moved to cities, we were able to create not just the factories, but also, education systems, sewage systems, wells, and it was, although we think of them as dark satanic mills, the cities they created were better places that improved quality of life. But it did come at the cost of building around mass. Factories are designed for mass production. Mass production is just for the things that sell in large numbers. What about everything else? So that was 1776 through, Henry Ford and the assembly line, and then we ended up with the second industrial revolution, and this was the digital one. But I'm not going to show you a computer. Instead, what I want to show is a laser printer, the first Apple laser writer in 1985. And the reason I pick a printer is because what it allowed, so yes, the personal computer, you could argue, started with the Apple II and Steve Jobs and Wozniak, and that was great, and that introduced the word personal to computing. It wasn't the first computer, obviously there'd been mainframes before, and it wasn't the most powerful computer, but it was the most personal computer. And it also introduced the word desktop. And suddenly, it expanded computing to a new class of users, which is all of us. And although we didn't compute any faster, we computed in different ways and found new uses. And that was the real transformation. It was hard to use, though. Then came the Mac in '84 and the desktop laser writer. And what that introduced was the concept of desktop publishing. Now, this doesn't seem like a big deal to us anymore. But remember, publishing used to be reserved for companies that owned or had access to printing plants before that. You needed access to a factory. And, the freedom of speech, at least on a mass scale, was reserved to those who bought ink by the barrel and rolls of paper by the rail card. What desktop publishing did is it turned 500 years of industrial skills into a software application and the menu item print. And we made a dog's breakfast of ugly fonts, and we did ugly stuff, but then we got better, and we learned how to we learned kerning and leading and flow, and we started to kind of figure out how to use this for things that the mass media didn't do. Okay, but that was for making a few copies, church newsletters or lost cat posters. We still weren't competing with the mass media because we couldn't reach everybody. And then along came the web, and publish became a button on your browser. And I know that when you have a blog or you just press the word publish, it doesn't seem like a big deal. But that is like literally taken the 20th century media monopoly and turned it into a button. So that was pretty mind-blowing, and we've seen what that can do. That was the second industrial revolution. I think the third is going to be basically combining the two. Combine the web's model to the Industrial Revolution's manufacturing model. And I'm going to use the same two analogies. Rather than a desktop printer, we have a 3D printer. This is the Replicator 2, Bre's new machine. All it does is it just does the same thing. You take an image on screen, you put it out in atoms in front of you, but it takes a lot of complexity out of the process. Turns again, hundreds of years of industrial skills into a menu item. You're still not manufacturing. You're prototyping. They call these rapid prototypers. How do you manufacture? And the answer here is the cloud. Because these things start digital, because they start on the screen, and because they, just like the printer, they speak the same language on your desktop as drive the biggest factories in the world, you can choose whether you want to make one or make many. You can, or make money. That was Freudian. That was massively Freudian. So Alibaba is a way you can just upload files and get anything made, but there's Shapeways and other sort of services, Pinocchio and others. Suddenly manufacturing becomes a choice. They take credit cards, PayPal. This is my grandfather, Fred Hauser. He was a Swiss immigrant in Hollywood in the 1930s, and he worked in the mechanical industry. That was great, but by night he was an inventor. And here is his drafting table. And what he invented was the automatic sprinkler system. Which, by the way, is exactly what a Swiss engineer, basically a watchmaker, would do. He brought him to Los Angeles. Los Angeles has got these sprinklers, grass, and it's the desert, but you have to turn them on. He's like, what if you put a watch on top of a sprinkler? So the little disc with the little pins for the hours. That was the one he invented. So this was great, and this was the tragedy of being a 20th century inventor. It was his patent. And the only way to get to market was to patent something and then license it. And he hated patents. They were expensive. He didn't like working with lawyers. It took forever, but that's what you got to do. And in the end, it came out as the Moody Rainmaster. You can sort of see, you can sort of relax at the beach while your garden waters itself. And this was a huge success. Most inventors didn't get this far. But it was also there's a slight sad tinge to it, which is that he lost control. His patent was licensed by a company who really didn't have any need for him anymore. So he was an inventor, but not an entrepreneur. This is me when I was 4, learning how to do mechanical drawing with my grandfather. And this is me at 12. This summer we were dark here. I think that's intentional. This summer we were going to. I would spend my summers with Grandpa, and he'd say, "This summer we're going to make an engine, a gas-powered engine." And he said, "I'll order the kit." So I knew what kits looked like, right? It's build models and planes, and it's like lots of plastic parts and instructions and numbers, and you put them together with glue. And inside this box were 4 blocks of metal. And I was like, "Where's the engine?" And he was like, "It's in there. We're going to get it out, and we're going to follow the blueprint." And he had a metal lathe and other tools, and it's just amazing. Like, it's the way a sculptor, takes a block of marble and cuts away the part that aren't the figure. A expert machinist takes the block of metal and cuts away the part that aren't the engine. And curlicues built up around your feet, and it's a beautiful, thrilling experience. But I forgot about it for 30 years because I'm not a machinist. I don't know how to work a metal lathe. I spent 1 summer with Grandpa doing this. It needed skills to go from idea to prototype to manufacturing. And the beauty of this machine here is that all those skills, again, are being done by the software, by the hardware. They've been done by the machine for you. Just as publishing turned into a button press, now machining turns into a button press. And that is incredibly liberating. It lowers the barrier to entry to realizing your idea. There's a film out called, it came out a few years ago called Flash of Genius, and this was a kind of a warning to the 20th century inventor: don't try to become an entrepreneur. This guy invented the intermittent windshield wiper, which is the windshield wipers that pause when it's not raining too hard. And this is the film setting of it. He decided to do something my grandfather did, and he patented it, but he didn't give it away. Instead, he wanted to build his own factory and make it himself. And he mortgaged his house, and it took years, and 61, 62, 63, 64, still not done. And then he leaves his factory in the film, and the rain's coming down, the new 1965 Mustangs are turning the corner, and the windshield wipers are pausing. And he realizes that his idea has been stolen, and he goes insane, and the movie follows his descent into madness, and it's great fun. But that's the cautionary lesson. You've got to own a factory to be an entrepreneur in manufacturing. You know, this is not for mere mortals. This is not for you. Let the big companies do it. Let's, license it and give it away. And so that was why I didn't become, an entrepreneur in those days, because it was too hard. Today, this is what the factory looks like. This is Tech Shop. There's lots of them around. It's like the gym model. Yeah, exactly. We love Tech Shop. They've just, I think the latest one's in Austin, just this last week. But this is the gym. So you go to a gym, and for a monthly fee, you get access to equipment that you couldn't afford and wouldn't want in your house. You have access to trainers. Other people are working out. It's very inspiring. Same thing. They have 3D printers, CNC machines, laser cutters, etc. About $110 a month, and you have access to basically everything you need to go from idea to prototype, and then you upload those files, or send them to a manufacturer or build your own, and you can make it any volume you want. So this guy here in the front is making this guy's. I have right laser. I might have laser. I don't know. This guy's making in the front is making a wireless control modules for the smart grid, electric grid. The guy behind him is doing vapor deposition chambers for synthetic diamonds. And the way back, they're making a lunar lander because why not? So that's an example of a maker space or a hacker space. And this is just a map of the current spread of them. They are everywhere. And these are the seeds of the next industrial revolution. You don't need one. If you want one on your desktop, they're easy and affordable. If you don't want one on your desktop, you'll increasingly have access to these maker spaces. And then you have access to the factory in the cloud. You can make it any volume. The funding model, you don't need a venture capitalist. We have a Kickstarter, which does 3 miraculous things. Number one, it moves money forward in time. The problem with the old model was that all your costs were at the front end. The prototyping, the tooling, the components inventory, making the things, warehousing them, getting them in the distribution channel, and then when they sell, then you get paid. By simply taking pre-orders, they bring the money forward to when you need it, which is at the beginning of the process. They do market research. If it doesn't pass, it probably wouldn't sell. And finally, they build a community. And that community is not just buying, not just customers, they're actually giving ideas. As those of you who followed Pebble, and it came out at the same time Sony released their smartwatch, and this just blew it away. These are like 4 guys in Palo Alto. They raised more than $10 million. What was interesting is how they listened to the community. The community wanted to be more waterproof. They're like, okay, we'll do that. The community wanted not to be Bluetooth 3, but Bluetooth 4. They're like, okay. They wanted more colors. They're like, great, we'll do that. And as a result, the community felt listened to, and they became evangelists for the product, because there's a little of their DNA in it. This is taking customers into participants. And that community-based approach is really what's the commonality in all of the maker success stories out here. So what this did is it made us all into designers. The fact that in the way that desktop publishing made us all into sort of, publishers, and we had to learn the language, and we now have access to design tools. And this means that we're going to have to get good at it. Fortunately, it's getting easy. This is just one of the CAD tools that you can download for free. This one's Autodesk 123D. And what's fascinating about it is, let's see if I can get the laser to work. Yeah, see this right there? You know how in your, it says make it. So you know in your word processor, you go to the file menu and you click print. And that simple menu item does this magical thing. It doesn't seem so magical anymore. But now these CADs say make. And what this does is it takes, again, all that complexity, all those skills you used to have to know to work, tools and machine tools and understand the costs and dynamics of manufacturing. This turns into a wizard that walks you through the choices between 2D and 3D and materials and cost calculations. And I decided, because my father created the automatic sprinkler system, I thought, what would Grandpa do today? So I just kind of hacked up a web-based open source sprinkler system called Open Sprinkler that, you could add sensors and connect it to your phone, and it knew the weather report for tomorrow, and I don't even have a garden, so it was a little bit of a stunt, and this is my enclosure, and the walls are too thin, it turns out. But I only knew that because I sent it up to Shapeways, and it came back, 5 days later, and it's like, oh, terrific. That was, I've learned my lesson, I'm becoming a better designer now. It's teaching me, all of those skills of industrial design, and it's making it easy. This is what my children do. So my girls, they play The Sims on their game time. Then when the game time's over, they want to play with a real dollhouse. They download furniture from Thingiverse, which is Bre's site, and there's a fantastic designer who goes by the name Pretty Little Things. She's a set designer.
Small things.
Pretty small things, forgive me. And she's a set designer by day, and then she uploads this furniture by night, and then we print it out, and then they paint it. And our boys, of course, make Warhammer 40K figures. It turns out that there's actually a point score to each one of these things. If you're a toy company, they should fill you with terror, right? They did it for free. And is it as good as the mass-produced ones? No. But is it just right for them? Yes. They value this because they had a hand in making it. And every kid's different, and every need is different. And the power to take your ideas and make them real, seen through a child, is jaw-dropping. This is the generation that's going to create the long tail of stuff, who have the ideas. In the same way that once we put personal computers in the hands of everybody, they found new things to make, we're doing the same things with physical goods. So you know how Apple's slogan was rip, mix, burn, and that was the end of the music industry, or at least one part of it. The idea that you empowered people to make music their own was transformative. Now we have Autodesk's slogan is rip, mod, make. You can take rip means you capture reality. You can take an iPhone or an iPad and just, with the camera on, just go click, 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 click.
1, 2, 3D catch.
1, 2, 3D catch, it's free. And it's reality scanning. You're scanning an object, and it turns it into this polygon mesh. Then you can clean it up, and you can make a Pez dispenser, because why not? So rip, mod, make could be as transformative to the physical world as rip, mix, burn was to the music world. So I just want to end on one note, which is sort of what kind of economy, what kind of labor force, what world does this create? I just want to show you sort of two different models. This guy on the left is Ronald Coase, a University of Chicago economist. In the 1930s, he answered everyone's like, we see that companies exist, but why do companies exist? What really is the driving force for a company? And he thought about it, and he came up with the idea of transaction costs, which is that companies exist. We work for a company under one roof with job descriptions to make it easier to figure out who does what. The person to the left of you does accounts receivable. The person to your right does accounts payable. And those are transaction costs. It's easy to get things done and find the right person to do the job. That's fine. 20th century, works great. The guy on the right, Bill Joy, one of the co-founders of Sun Microsystems, he said, that's terrific, but, quote unquote, whoever you are, the smartest people in the world don't work for you. Which is statistically true, and yet what are you going to do about it? The smartest people in the world probably are Chinese or Indian, or they're too young, or they're too old, or how are you going to find them? And so we end up with these filters. We end up with what school did you go to? What grades did you get? What language do you speak? What country do you live in? What's your employment history? Are you available? And so those don't get the smartest people in the world. They get the safest people in the world. So what are you going to do, right? How are you going to find the smartest people in the world? They're unattainable. So we settle for these traditional metrics. That was then. I just wanted to sort of finish with one story, which is now. This is I got into this through Arduino, and we ended up doing robotics and drones. And so we have a drone community and a drone company. And this guy here on the cover of Make, which is the Bible of this movement, is Jordi Munoz. And Jordi is my co-founder on this. And I just want to explain a little bit about how I met him. He was on the community. And I was basically sharing my ignorance. I didn't understand anything about drones, but I thought that in your phone you've got all these sensors, gyroscopes, accelerometers, magnetometers, GPS, etc. I was like, surely you could fly a plane with this, but I didn't know how. So I just started asking questions, and people started answering them. And then Jordi shows up, and he's flying a helicopter with a Wii controller, and I was like, that's awesome. And then we did a blimp, and then we did a plane autopilot, and then I was like, then people were like, can you possibly do this for us? You know, we'd like to buy it, ready to go. And we said, okay, and we started hand soldering, and that didn't work, and then we started a company. And I said, you know, before we actually go into business together, I'd like to know a little something about you. It turned out Jordy was a 19-year-old from Tijuana who just graduated from high school. There he is with Gigio, his friend, and in our first garage. And today, here's just one of our 2 factories in San Diego and Tijuana. He's now 26. He's now CEO of a multi-million-dollar robotics company. And I just wanted to say this is the answer to Joy's paradox. I didn't find the smartest guy in the world. He found me. And because we did things in the open as a community, because we shared our ideas and our ignorance and our work in progress, the right people come and they work with us because they're driven by passion. They're driven because they want to do this, they want it for themselves, and because we default to sharing, they return the favor. They put their ideas out there, and then everyone builds on each other's work. So this, what are the odds? 10 years ago, if the editor of Wired is going to start a drone company, what are the odds he's going to end up with a Mexican teenager? And yet here we are. He was the right person. He was the smartest guy in the world for this job, and we've solved Joy's paradox. Right now, by applying the web's innovation model to real things, the right people will find each other and work together and change the world. So I have my book on this is coming out on Tuesday. We'll have copies outside, and thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you. So one of the things that I think is really great about your presentation is talking about, was it your grandfather?
Grandfather.
Your grandfather. And I think that I'm sure for everyone here at Maker Faire, there's something that happened in your life, whether it was when you were a kid or a teenager or even as an adult, that twisted your head around to say, like, wait, I can make this. As you were giving your presentation, I remembered something that I haven't thought about in a long time. When I was like between 2 and 8 years old, my father had a press where he was interested in the Tao Te Ching, so he translated it and he wanted to distribute it. And so he actually got a really large press, one of these things that it was probably 100 years old, and it smelled like ink, like petroleum products. It was great. And it had this huge wheel that was hooked up. Originally, it had been run by hand, and it was hooked up to a motor and a belt. And then for me, so that was I was just thinking about okay, yeah, this idea of being able to just decide you're going to do things and then just brute force technology into your garage to make it happen is really powerful. For me, the next step was I went to my Aunt Meredith and Uncle Joe's house when I was probably 6 or 7, and my Uncle Joe, his job was to wake up at 4 a.m. every morning and drive around in his Japanese pickup truck, and he knew all the trash routes in Boston. And we'd go to them before the trash trucks came and get all the good stuff and fix it up and then sell it at flea markets on the weekend. So it was like my dream job. And that week, I think I was there 10 days, we picked up a bunch of bikes. And I think he probably did most of the work, but he let me screw things together as well. And we put together a bike, and I got to, and he was like, what color do you want? And I'm like, black. No surprise, right? And so I got to spray paint the bike. We put it all together, and then I had to spray paint it. And at the time, these little kind of pads on them were there so you could do tricks and not hurt yourself really badly. So we made those and with foam and tape, and I went home with a bike that I knew exactly how it worked. And it wasn't just that I had a bike, it was that I knew I could fix it. And it did break, and then I did fix it. And so it was I think there's some chemical in the brain that makers have that is released when you either fix something or you complete a project, and it's a very powerful motivator. And so I got hooked. So fast forward to later on, I was working, did some work for Jim Henson's Creature Shop. Basically, I was like a runner, and my job would be okay, we're making gorilla hands, and we need to make a static set of hands, and we're going to wrap them in silicon, and we need something to act like bones that's flexible and bendable, but that won't break, because it takes 100 hours to actually cure the silicone and stuff. So I'd be like, okay, I'll figure that out. And I'd drive around and run around trying to find like aluminum that wouldn't like, and then I'd have to like count how many times it would flex before it break. And we'd figure out, we really pushed rubber gorilla technology farther than ever before. And then I basically, if you've ever worked on films, when you're on location, you work like 12-hour, 14-hour days, and then you do, and for like 6-day weeks, and then you do it all over again. So I did that for a couple years before getting homesick, and went back home to Seattle. Well, now my home is Brooklyn, but at the time it was Seattle. And got hooked on, I created my own puppet theater, Little Chicken Puppet Theater, and started doing workshops in schools teaching kids how to make puppets. And I think I'd always liked the kind of feeling of teaching, but I was always scared that young people would like hurt me. So, but after doing it for a little bit, I got hooked, and so I became a teacher, and I started teaching kids how to make stuff and how to get that that sense of accomplishment that you've made something. I started wanting to get that out there more, and that sort of naturally led into me getting kind of having to do this in middle school. You have to teach things like 5 or 6 times a day. So I just started making videos, which it turns out my students paid much more attention to me on video than they did with me in person. So it meant I only had to say it once, like on video, and then they remembered everything I said on video. But if you've ever been in the classroom, they never remember anything that you say in person. So it was a neat little hack. And then I started publishing them. And for me, this is like 2004, 2005. I think I'm Video Blogger 13. And a few weeks later, I looked and like 30,000, this is before YouTube. This is like we're uploading to Internet Archive, right? And 30,000 people had watched my video. And I was like, that's more people than fit in a Mariners stadium. Yes! And the race was on. I was hooked. My self-esteem was directly tied to video views at that point. And I started making more. And then Make Magazine came along, and thank them for, just really appreciate them for doing this. And they said, we'd like to pay you half-time to make some videos for us. And I was like, great. And they were like, and it just so turned out that it was like about as much money as I was making full-time as a teacher. So I was like, awesome. This is like, this is like, great. I have it was like I had a full-time job teaching, and then I'd go home and I'd work and edit video until I'd fall asleep on the keyboard. And I got in with this group of folks at it wasn't even called a hackerspace at the time. It was MakerBot Labs, and this is in Seattle. It's really somebody's living room that just happened to have like an 11-ton mill in it. And we would do, it was a bunch of friends, and they were all actual like programmers and legitimate like code folks, and they would go to their jobs and do their code stuff, and then on the weekends we'd get together on Saturday nights like proper males and make robots. And actually there were a lot of women involved too. I shouldn't say that. Because this isn't just a boy thing. And first I got hooked on CNC because I was like, let's make a machine that takes your picture and then draws you. And everybody was like, it was so great. This community was like, yeah, okay, who's buying the Mountain Dew? And so like 12 pizzas later, we made a machine, a drawbot. And it was really fun to be able to be like, I'm going to take this thing that exists in the world, take a picture of it, and then this robot is going to create something artistic. And it met my criteria for a good project, which is you don't know what's going to happen at the end, but you start anyway. So fast forward a little bit, I moved to New York, and there wasn't a hackerspace like that, and that community didn't exist in New York, or at least I didn't know where it was. So I set out the honeypot of this thing I called the Microcontroller Study Group. And people came. Like, it was great, and it was just basically a show and tell. People would bring their little GPS-enabled tanks, they'd bring their miniature flamethrowers, they'd bring their like cool things that was a microphone that would display the waveform on a custom LED grid, and we started going out to dinner afterwards, and we started NYC Resistor that way. Eventually we were like, okay, we just basically did it until there were 10 people, and then it was like, I basically said, let's each put in $1,000 and do this thing. And 9 of us did, and that was enough money to like pay rent on a space down, pay the deposit and the first and last, and then we were off and running. And we had to this was after we were really inspired. Basically, one of the things that we did right was we read this thing called the Hackerspace Design Patterns, which if you haven't read, it's totally worth Googling. Joel and Pylon put it together out of C4, which is the Chaos Computer Club Cologne branch of the CCC. And it's just basically like, it taught us to like avoid bike shed moments. And if you're in a hackerspace, you know exactly what this is. This is where everybody just has to argue about the color of the bike shed, and it will never get made. But if you come in and you say, we're going to make a thermonuclear reactor, everybody's like, that sounds technical. You go for that. And you can just run with it. So identifying bike shed moments is critical for being able to move forward, so you can get past, like, you know, what the URL is going to say in your T-shirt and actually get the T-shirt made. So a couple of the guys, Adam Mayer, Zach Smith, and me, got into 3D printing. We're working on the RepRap project, which is an academic project to make self-replicating rapid prototypers. The downside of this is you have to have one to have one. So we started MakerBot. We decided we didn't just want to have a machine that would make other machines. We wanted a machine that we could distribute to people, where we could all have the same machine and we could all work on it even if it wasn't perfect and make it better. And so we spent about 3 months locked up at NYC Resistor with a couple cases of Club Mate, and like literally we went through 2 cases of ramen, which just don't do. Just don't. It's really unhealthy. And we came out with the Cupcake CNC, the first MakerBot. And we made 20 boxes that had the kits in them, and we put up what we thought were pretty good documentation, which immediately we just got, people were like, this needs to be better. And we're like, it's a wiki. And we launched, and we thought, okay, we'll tell the internet, and we made 20, so that'd be like 10 this month and like 10 next month, and then we'll catch up. And we sold them all like within a week. And this is like pre-Kickstarter. I wish Kickstarter had been around back then. We wouldn't have given up equity to start, because we'd had to get $75,000. We needed $75,000 to get all of the infrastructure in place to do this. And it was off to the races. People got these things and they put them together and they were making things. And it wasn't perfect, but the other option was something, you know, at the time I think the most basic cupcake was $750, which was like an extra $100 more than it cost us to make it, because we didn't know how to price things. One of the things that Chris and I both talk about, if you're making something, there's this, just start at 2.6 multiplier on your bill of materials and adjust it accordingly based on your whether or not on how much money you need. But you know, that first year, none of us, like, I didn't pay rent in my apartment because, you know, we weren't making money, and all the money had to go to the robot parts because we had to. It was more important to get them out into the world. But next thing you know, another thing we learned was after that we launched the cupcake, we had this thing. How are we doing for time? We should get into.
Well, we've got 20 minutes.
Okay, so I'll wrap this up here pretty quickly. But one of the mistakes we made, or it wasn't a mistake at the time until we looked at it in retrospect, but we started working on our next piece of hardware in the wild. We had this pre-GitHub, we had an SVN repository, and Zach uploaded the designs to a prototype of the MakerWave, which immediately rippled through the community. MakerBot's working on a new machine, which immediately rippled through our sales, and we were broke again. Nobody would buy anything because there was this thing called the MakerWave. And we actually ended up making the Thingomatic instead, but we had to get on that really quickly because we had to make something before we died of starvation. We wouldn't have died of starvation, but before we had to go out and get other jobs, you know. At the time, I was like doing videos for the Terminator 4 advanced thing and doing all sorts of stuff to just like make ends meet, and we were really trying, like, it's not magic starting a business. It's really like you just do whatever you can to make it work. Maybe it is magic now for some people. Kickstarter's magic. Anyhow, next thing you know, Thingomatic, we launched that. That went pretty well. And then we launched the replicator, and we launched that fully assembled. This is the replicator too. Because with the Thing-O-Matic, we'd gotten to the point where people were buying it, and they weren't us. They weren't kit makers. They weren't people who like to obsess over how it goes together. And they didn't like getting to a certain point and realizing they'd used the wrong screws and they had to take it apart and start over again, like many of us enjoy doing. And it meant we had to spend all this time in email. I was spending like at that point, I was spending like 6 or 8 hours just answering emails of people like, it's not working. And I'd be like, it's because you put it together upside down, or just that it required like a certain level of maker ability to be able to put it together, which is kind of, it's a shocking reality when you realize that, you know, there's something that's learned from fixing a bicycle 1,000 times that you get, which is sort of like a commitment to doing it until it works, that not everybody in the world has. In fact, some people think like you should just be able to buy it and it should just work. Revolting development. So we came out with a Replicator 1 fully assembled, which actually bummed a lot of people out because they were like, I want to make it. And we were like, okay, for those who want to make it, like, we'll take our lunch hours and take it apart after we put it together and test it. Nobody took us up on that, surprisingly. But it was one of those things that was kind of, so next thing you know, we looked into manufacturing in China, and that wasn't going to work for us. It turned out that like a couple things you should know, like we thought, okay, silver bullet, here's our design, off to China, it'll just come back and happy, happy, joy, joy. But it turns out communication problems, cultural issues, like all sorts of challenges of just having it be 12 hours away just weren't going to work for us. So we ended up just continuing to make things in Brooklyn. We just squeezed more people and more desks and more shelves going up higher into the space, into our Brooklyn workshop. And I can tell you there's nothing better than manufacturing in America. It's so awesome. I get to walk around the corner and see what is being made. And if there's a problem, like we know about it within minutes, if not seconds, because somebody will be like, there's a problem. If that happens in a country far away, you've got like, you might not understand the person who's saying there's a problem. They might not care, and they'll ship it anyway. And you'll get, you know, your 1,000 thingamajigs, and they'll all be wrong, and they will have fulfilled their contract. So, so I could go on and on about that, but I'll resist that. We're really proud of the machine we just launched, and it's a rock-solid machine that is our 4th generation machine that, not counting the MakerWave. And it massive build volume, 100 micron layer resolution, things just feel good. And because we've shared so much, you can see Maker Faire in some ways has become, it's a good chunk of it's like 3D printer Faire. Like I would estimate it's like 35% of Maker Faire right now is either people with 3D printers doing amazing things with them, or people making variants of 3D printers and finding different ways of making it happen. It's a very exciting time. I think now we should talk about like we should just kind of like talk about problems that we've had so that other people don't have to have them.
Yes. Well, I mean, we have, let's say 15 minutes.
Okay.
Let's just chat for 5 minutes, and then we'll take questions from
Great.
the audience. You know, the number one pushback I get when I get excited about this is people say it's a hobby, it's small, it's never going to get big. And the theme of this is getting big. I know so you're in the 10 millions, and you know, and someday you'll be in the hundreds, and you know, someday we'll create a big company here. One thing that you know, if we get this right, is that we can bring manufacturing, innovative manufacturing, back to small business and then larger business in America. Now, America is already the world's biggest manufacturer, so don't believe that we've lost the ability to manufacture, but we've lost a lot of employment, a lot of people who are working in manufacturing, and it tends to be concentrated around cars and things like that. All those small machine shops that used to serve the U.S. got labor arbitraged away and went to Asia. I think that what digital production allows us to do is to automate a lot of the process. And you know,
for the small guy.
For the small guy. So we started in China, and had all the same problems you did. And then we brought it back to San Diego and then crossed 20 minutes across the border in Tijuana because, exactly the reasons, because we got flexibility.
Yeah.
We were able to, so the problem with China is that you have to do big batches to get economies of scale. And this has like 3 problems. Number one, you sink up a lot of your capital in sending out there. Number two, if it's wrong, you've lost all that capital. And 3, and this is the worst one, it stops you from innovating because you've got to sell all those 10,000 before you can produce a new design.
Yep.
So what we decided that the big advantage of making stuff back close to us, and again, same thing in the same facility, is we could do just-in-time manufacturing. And so we create, we have pick and place lines, and we create 64 boards at a time, and we'll rev the design every day if we need to. And then although our labor costs are a little bit higher than China, this innovation
can move
and
so much faster.
Flexibility thing is more than compensates for it.
It's interesting, like. This machine was supposed to have launched in November. And then this guy comes along.
Oh, sorry.
And he says, what would it look like if we put you on the cover of Wired for the October issue? And I was like, yeah, no problem. And then inside we had to compress. We started working on this machine in May. And so we literally, like when we did the stamped metal, guys are off in their car to Jersey. They deliver the files to the folks. They literally watch it being made, they bring it back, we test it, we go back again. And just being able to do that kind of stuff meant that we could move. You should not be able to make something like this in 5 months, but that's the power of being able to work locally and with people, and yeah, it's cool.
In slight fairness, it was also in time for Maker Faire in New York.
It had to happen.
I think we should probably
let's just take
questions from the audience. We'll start over here.
In general, the law tends to sort of run behind technology in manufacturing. So, where do you see sort of laws catching up to into account this sort of at-home manufacturing, where you can make a part for a packaging economy in your garage?
Let's repeat the question. The question was, how is law evolving to address this, and more to the point, how is this challenging existing laws?
One of the things about hardware and things that people don't understand is that things aren't bound by copyright law. And I'm not a lawyer. So when you produce a thing, it's actually automatically open unless you have a patent on it. So things by their nature are open, and I don't, when we started, I kind of expected that the patent industry would be over by the time we had to deal with it. It's not. So it's an interesting, so what I see is, but I think the law of things is going to be super interesting if people want to, but right now, like what happened with music is the RIAA jumped in, and it got real messy in law around music and downloadable things, and right now there's no RIAA of things, and we like it that way, and I think we'll have to actually, as a community, decide, we're going to have to make some decisions as a community somehow that can actually happen to protect the openness of things so that people can't come in and just make, so that you can actually make what you want.
Let me follow up on that. So you say there's no copyright law for things. So I can scan something, in beautiful, 1,000 million polygon resolution.
Yep.
Post the file on Thingiverse, let people download it for free, and I haven't infringed in any way?
Well, the thing is that the way that I understand it is that it's not a copy actually, it's a derivative.
Right.
If you took the original file for that thing, and then you posted it to Thingiverse, that would not be cool. But if you make a new file based on a scan, it's a different object. This hasn't been tested in court. I think that's one of the edges.
Well, the reason I ask is that, so I showed you guys my Warhammer figures, my kids' Warhammer figures they downloaded. Well, it turns out that Warhammer is a board game.
They go after people.
Made by Games Workshop. And Anyway, they're beautiful, but they're kind of expensive. And the thing is, the kits, the little sort of, battle squads, there's 11 figures, but there's only 10 bases. Don't know why that is, but it's really annoying. And they sell, like, extra bases. Maybe that's why. Anyway, so my kids are like, I want all 11. Can you make a base? And the base is just a disc. It's just two circles and a beveled edge. And so we printed it out, and I put it on Thingiverse. And
did you call it a Warhammer thing?
Well, then I said Warhammer 40K base, and the first comment was, "Dude, you're in so much trouble." They file these DMCA takedowns.
Yep.
And so I said, well, that would be kind of a cool story, and I am a magazine editor, so I then emailed Games Workshop, and I said, "Look what I just did. You okay with that?" And then to their credit, they were super nice about it, and they got back and they said, "Actually, we have no problem with the disc. But the moment you called it a Warhammer 40K base, you were admitting that you had copied our design." And so I said, "Okay, thank you, that's very helpful." And then I got advice from everyone else. And what they end up doing is they end up sort of, the title is, disc for board game figures. In the text, it says, "Here's a disc for board game figures. Don't use it for Warhammer 40K. You should definitely buy the real thing." And the reason they type that is so that when you type in 40K in the search term, it'll show up. So that's where we are right now.
It's an interesting one. I mean, yeah, and the comments, people know, and that's a trademark issue in some ways as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So trademark is, if you, like, people have put stuff up, and if they just hadn't have called that, they wouldn't have put a
trademark. Oh, let's take another question. Gentleman over there, yeah. Yes, you. So that article was really sort of driven by me getting a MakerBot and, kind of blowing my mind, and then sending files up to Alibaba and having like boxes of machine-made things show up because I just pushed some buttons. What changed is Kickstarter. Kickstarter, I think, is, and I mean, I'll actually add to that. I mean, Etsy, I think, is a big contributor, is this marketplaces to enable small business and entrepreneurship. The Kickstarter is obviously a crowdfunding model. Etsy, I think, is a fantastic marketplace. There's a lot of other Kickstarter, Kickstarter-like sites out there, some of them specializing in individual niches. But that I think is and these are like billion-dollar businesses now, and I think that's been the big game changer. Anything else for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just getting better and more accessible, and more people have them, and like, I used to go on the subway with a MakerBot, and people would ask me what it was, and I'd be like, just to mess with them, I'd be like, "It's a teleporter." and they'd be like, "Oh, really?" And I'd be like, "No, it's a 3D printer," and they'd give me the same look. And I think it's a lot more aware. One of the things that we have now is we just have, if something happens in the world, everyone can know about it 10 seconds later.
Yeah.
And we're getting to the point now, like, where my grandfather is following like the Twitter feed of MakerBot, and he knows what's going on. And he calls me up and he says, "I've got this guy, who used to be in the Department of Defense. He loves your machine, and great. I can't wait to use this." And he's in his retirement community. So it's like, so I think the speed of information has changed too.
I'll add one more thing. It used to be hard. I have MakerBot 400. That kicked my ass. That was so hard. The PID settings, kind of. I'm a little excited about this moment. I've kind of in slightly hyperbolic form called the Macintosh moment. I don't think we're at 1977 and it's the Apple II. I think it's 1984 and this is the Mac. And what the Mac did, it wasn't the first personal computer, but it was easier to use and it just worked. Well, maybe that, Anyway, it revealed a path that didn't require expertise.
Yes.
And there's, one of the cool things about things that are hard to use is that you're forced to go online and to work with people, and that creates community. But it is a limiting factor. And I think the fact that you can just sort of, this is no harder to use than a laser jet or an inkjet, is going to mainstream this movement.
It's an interesting moment for us as MakerBot as well, because our community has shifted. We've originally, like, you're lucky you weren't in the first 100, because those were all, we literally shipped really complicated boards that were all, and solder paste.
Yeah, solder.
And like just told people to put solder paste on the right places. There's like 20 different resistors. They're all different values that all look the same that you have to put in the right places, and then stick it in your toaster oven. So it was interesting, like sometimes people complain about like, oh, I'm having a hard time figuring out where the download button is, and there's people be like, yeah, I walked both hills, walked up the hill both ways in the snow, and I surface mounted this thing.
You know, every time, what we've learned as we scaled, is every time we take complexity out of the process, we get an order of magnitude more sales. So when we took soldering out of the process, 10x. When it went from a kit to ready to make, ready to use, 10x. So the biggest barrier here is ease of use. As we can, work together as a community to not just make something, but make it easier to use, beautiful, instructions, well packaged, etc. This is how we mainstream this packaging.
You wouldn't believe how obsessive I am about packaging now. Like, I would never have thought that I would, but like packaging matters. Like knowing how packaging works. Like I look at products now and I look for the shrink wrap line and I'm like, how did they get it so nice?
Yes, sir, with the tie. Yeah, you.
How long until we can download a car?
You can download a car today. In fact, I think there's like 200 cars on Thingiverse. But well, you can strap them to your feet and skateboard with them if you want.
No, I mean, the answer is right now. Local Motors has exactly. So
if I had a garage,
and they've open sourced. It's a Baja racer, so it's not it doesn't have airbags. But aside from that,
and you have to go down and make it. You have to go down and they hold your hands and.
You don't have to.
No, really? I thought you had to for the law.
Oh, that's interesting.
I actually think you have to for a Local Motors machine.
The files are open, so they want you can make parts. Maybe to make a whole car, you have to go down there, but you can make the parts and add to it yourself. Boy, your turn. Pick somebody.
You right here.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah. So the question was, how long will FDM be like relevant? So interestingly, I can't actually use the 3 letters FDM because they're trademarked by another company. So we use FFF, Fused Filament Fabrication, same thing. But the idea is how long will this technology that's basically like ultra hot rodded glue gun be relevant? And one of the cool things about this technology is that it's not toxic. So it's really friendly for both classrooms. It makes real things that you can use, and they're real models, and you can use colors. There's a bunch of other things that we looked at out there that are actually, many of them are still under patent. We actually can only do this because the patents are out of patent. And we actually can't do all the innovation we want to because we have to route around. It's our goal to be very respectful in the patent space. And so I think you'll see a lot of those other patents on other types of manufacturing methods open up, but it's tricky though. Like there's some really cool powder stuff that I'd love to play with and get in people's homes, but the powder is so fine that if you breathe it in, it's really bad for you. There's a lot of really cool goo stuff going out right now, super ultra cool, but you don't want to touch your skin to that, and if you drink it, you better call the Mr. Yuck line. So I think you're going to see a lot more, like a lot of the big machines. Like we took one of the refrigerator machines and made it small and accessible. There's a bunch more out there that are just waiting as a frontier for things to pop over in the patent thing. The trick is in some cases, the patent system is manipulatable. So if you know your patent examiner and what date they have to submit all of their, they have to meet a quota every year for how many patents they examine. And if you know the date by which they have to meet their final quota, and you submit your patent a year and 18 months, which is how long it takes till they have to look at it, if you submit it exactly 18 months so that it shows up on that day, some people have been able to actually get patents over and over again, which they shouldn't be able to do, but the system is such that it's not a perfect system. So it's going to be an interesting adventure going forward as we look into other techniques. And I think that there's other ones here that people are exploring. I love this one. This one's great for makers and people who want to build prototypes.
I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, folks.